Ants are everywhere, and so diminutive is their size and so common and mundane their presence that it's quite easy to tune out their existence almost entirely. Yet in our indifference toward these tiny insects, many of us miss out on some of the truly fascinating dramas that unfold on their miniature stage. And not everything in an ant's world is quite what it seems.
Spiders, for better or for worse, generally have an easier time grabbing our attention compared to ants, and few spiders are quite as outgoing and seemingly tailored to draw the eye than the theatre kids of the arachnid world, the jumping spiders. But aside from this gaudy extravaganza of iridescent sheens and technicolor patterns, are other jumping spiders much less readily noticed. Mayhaps you've already crossed paths with one, several, 20, or plenty, yet never did their existence even register. So let us now meet these virtuosos of secrecy, the ant-mimicking jumping spiders.
Ant mimicry in jumping spiders is by no means a niche phenomenon. On the contrary, it's a surprisingly widespread trait exhibited by hundreds of different species across multiple genera, with the genus Myrmarachne, which translates to mean ant spider, being among the most diverse and well-studied. Myrmarachne is a widespread genus, and though Southeast Asia appears to be the epicenter of their diversity, these spiders occur in many other parts of the world as well, and there's a respectable assortment of species to be found here in Queensland, Australia.
When examining a Myrmarachne up close, its identity becomes obvious enough. The eyes, for one, are unmistakably those of a jumping spider, but when viewed from a distance, it's easy to see why these spiders can slip under the radar. Their size, color, and even shape strongly echoes that of the ants we so readily ignore. And it's not just their physical appearance that mirrors their insect namesake to this intriguing degree. The way they move, too, appears distinctively ant-like. Spiders and ants move about in different ways, and this contrast becomes all the more apparent when their movements are mapped. Jumping spiders tend to wander around in a largely random manner, and pause on a regular basis, perhaps to survey their surroundings. Meanwhile, ants, with few exceptions like the heavily sight-oriented Myrmecia, tend to find their way about the world by following the scent trails left behind by other ants. In doing so, they swivel from side to side to better keep track of their chemical lead, and compared to spiders, they also move more continuously, with fewer pauses. The pathing tendencies of Myrmarachne show a striking parallel with those of ants. Like ants, and very unlike other jumping spiders, Myrmarachne move continuously and oscillate from side to side, so that when their movements are mapped out, they form a wavy or zigzagging pattern. So even though these, like all jumping spiders, have excellent vision and navigate primarily by sight, they move in a way that echoes the mannerisms of an ant blindly following a scent trail, as a means of heightening their already very convincing disguise.
And there's something else about the spider's movements that makes the ruse more compelling still. Ants, like any insect, possess 6 legs and 2 antennae. Spiders, however, have 8 legs and no antennae, and Myrmarachne is no exception. When walking, Myrmarachne uses all 8 of its legs like any other spider would, but when the spider stops, even for the briefest of pauses, it raises its front pair of legs and sometimes even waves them around in stunning likeness to an ant's antennae. But is this behavior an element of the disguise, or could it be for something else? Myrmarachne aren't the only spiders that wave their front legs around in this way. Similar behaviors have been observed in the ground spiders from the families Odariidae. These spiders hunt ants, and the waving of their front legs has been found, in some species, to be a means of more effectively detecting the alarm pheromones that their ant prey releases into the air. So, could the leg-waving behaviors of Myrmarachne also be for the purpose of detecting airborne chemicals? Well, it seems that this may not be the case. For one, Myrmarachne, though they mimic ants, do not seem to prey on them with any degree of regularity, so they don't need to be especially attuned to the ant's chemical cues. Furthermore, Myrmarachne, as aforementioned, are guided primarily by their keen sense of sight as opposed to smell, which makes it all the more likely that their leg-waving behaviour is not for chemosensory purposes. Thus, it would appear most plausible that, for Myrmarachne, these curious mannerisms are indeed part of their ant facade, mimicking an ant's antennae in what has been scientifically referred to as antennal illusion.
But why would spiders mimic ants in the first place? We humans, generally speaking, are more afraid of spiders than ants, so from our perspective it might seem odd that there'd be any incentive for a spider to mimic something we almost universally regard as less intimidating. It may therefore come as something of a surprise to us that there are, in fact, clear benefits to be gained from ant mimicry. For many animals, ants aren't exactly a desirable meal. They're too small to pack a meaningful amount of nourishment unless consumed en masse. They can be aggressive and territorial when defending their colonies. Some are armed with painful stings, and they produce formic acid, which can make these insects a most unpleasant mouthful. So for many hunters, great and small, ants are simply more trouble than they're worth, and anything that sufficiently resembles an ant might also get passed over by would-be predators.
Jumping spiders are small spiders, and there's a broad array of animals that could easily make a meal of them, and among their major predators are other jumping spiders. Jumping spiders regularly hunt their smaller kindred, which in some species can comprise up to 10% of the spider's diet. But how jumping spiders react to ants is a different story. Though a handful of unique species like this Suonatore appear to be specialized ant predators, most avoid ants altogether, and Myrmarachne, needless to say, stands to benefit from this widespread aversion.
The form of mimicry exhibited by Myrmarachne is a textbook example of Batesian mimicry, wherein a relatively harmless species, in this case the spider, evolves to resemble a more noxious species, in this case ants, for increased protection against predators. And the survival perks that Myrmarachne gains from mimicking ants are more than hypothetical. Observations of interactions between these and larger jumping spiders provide clear evidence that their facade is of measurable value. Compared to species that don't mimic ants, Myrmarachne are targeted significantly less often by bigger jumping spiders, and since jumping spiders are strongly sight-oriented hunters that use their acute sense of vision to identify their prey, it's plausible that predation by jumping spiders is a major driving factor in the evolution of this incredible visual disguise. One of the first patterns you may notice across the various Myrmarachne species is that many don't just mimic the general appearance of an ant, they resemble a particular type of ant they live alongside. For example, this Myrmarachne luxuosa is quite clearly a mimic of the golden-tailed ant from the genus Polyrhacus. Meanwhile, another species from North Queensland mimics the green weaver ant Ecophylla. This raises the question of whether the evolution and diversification of these ant-mimicking spiders tracked the evolution of their ant counterparts over time, or alternatively was an asynchronous affair wherein the spiders diversified more recently to mimic an already established array of ant models. But how do we put each of these options to the test? Well, by analysing the genetics of several Myrmarachne variants and the ant species they each mimic, we can reconstruct their respective family trees, which tells us how the species within each group relate to one another, and the approximate time frames of their evolution. A study published in 2007 did exactly that, and the results were pretty telling. Here it was found that the family trees of the selected Myrmarachne species and their corresponding ant models were not congruent, indicating that the two groups followed different evolutionary patterns. Furthermore, the Myrmarachne species investigated were all very closely related to one another, pointing to a relatively recent diversification. Meanwhile, the relationships between their ant models were considerably more distant, indicating that their evolutionary radiation occurred deeper in the past. From this, it can be concluded that the evolution of the ants and the spiders that mimic them occurred over differing time frames, and thus the results of this research can be regarded as ample evidence against co-evolution between ant and spider, making the other option, in which the ants evolved toward their current diversity first, and the spiders evolved more recently to mimic them, the more likely proposal.
The variety that these ant-mimicking spiders exhibit goes beyond the different types of ants they mirror. Curiously, there is also a considerable degree of variation in the completeness of their disguise. Some are such incredible doppelgangers that they can bluff even the sharpest of eyes, while others, though they certainly bear some resemblance to ants, would, in a mimicry contest, be given a participation ribbon and a vaguely condescending pat on the back at best. And the existence of these imperfect mimics, so to speak, has been a key facet of yet more fascinating research about the evolution of these remarkable spiders.
One of the major things demonstrated by these incomplete mimics is the fact that ant mimicry, and whatever benefits may come with it, is not an all-or-nothing affair. The intermediate forms that straddle the line between typical jumping spiders and well-developed ant mimics still stand to gain some degree of protection from their partial disguise. And in addition to this, they also avoid the worst of the shortcomings that befall the more complete ant mimics. For beneficial as the ant facade indubitably is, it does not come free of baggage, as some of the ant mimics' adaptations are directly counterproductive to the very abilities that make jumping spiders such effective hunters, especially their namesake talent, jumping.
Spiders jump not by means of muscle contractions as you may expect, but through a hydraulic mechanism, where compression of the body forces hemolymph, which is the spider equivalent to blood, into the spider's legs, causing them to extend. And if this is done with sufficient pressure, it can generate enough force to catapult the animal off the ground. But this apparatus requires a certain amount of body volume and hemolymph flow to operate properly. Typical jumping spiders, with their rather stocky bodies and thick legs, are optimized for this, but the same can't be said for the ant mimics. Myrmarachne species, just like their ant models, have thin, spindly legs. Many also possess a narrow body with a pronounced constriction just behind the head region, which makes the two body sections of a spider resemble the three body sections of an ant. But these modifications, though they certainly amplify the spider's disguise, are likely to dampen the functionality of their hydraulic system, and it's thus hardly a surprise that compared to the more archetypal jumping spiders, Myrmarachne tend to be poor jumpers, and in some cases, perhaps incapable of jumping at all.
This compromised jumping ability has its implications for the spider's success as hunters too. A 2020 study compared the prey capture rates of a multitude of ant-mimicking and non-ant-mimicking jumping spiders, and found that the ant-mimics displayed significantly lower success rates when hunting, with the narrow-bodied, heavily constricted species being the most handicapped in this regard. The reduced hunting abilities of Myrmarachne may, in turn, have provided a selective pressure for these spiders to find alternative sources of nourishment, as indicated by a 2018 publication focused on the potential dietary compositions of an assortment of Myrmarachne species from Southeast Asia. This study examined the levels of the stable carbon and nitrogen isotopes 13C and 15N present in the spiders' bodies. These isotopes are often used as predictors of diet, with higher levels corresponding to higher positions on the food chain and similar levels between animals indicating similar feeding habits. In Myrmarachne, these isotopes existed at lower levels compared to other spiders, and, depending on species, were instead roughly equivalent to those of omnivorous or even nectar-feeding ants, with the narrow-bodied forms having the lowest isotope levels. What this evinces is that, for the Myrmarachne species examined, plant material like nectar and honeydew may be an important source of nourishment, especially in the case of the narrow-bodied forms whose hunting abilities are most heavily compromised by their anatomy. So it seems that by adopting a very unorthodox diet for a spider, at least some Myrmarachne species have managed to circumvent one of the most crippling drawbacks of their disguise. Ant mimicking spiders are truly fascinating, but I would like to caution you against letting yourself get too interested in them. Otherwise, you'll end up in my position and be completely unable to walk past a single ant without stopping to double check if it's actually a spider. And given how many ants you're likely to cross paths with on a daily basis, that's going to amount to a lot of wasted time. If you desire to learn about some of the other incredible spiders that you may come across in your local area, then feel free to check out this video about backyard spiders in the land down under. And if you want to dive into the spider's deep history, then head on over to this video here. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on my next adventure.